Ferrari and Adrian Newey have been chasing each other in Formula One for a very long time. There have already been approaches in the past, precisely three, as the legendary car designer himself has candidly admitted on more than one occasion. It's known, history is made of cycles and recurrences, and human beings tend to repeat certain behaviors and mistakes, so much so that in the end, it's anything but history, the teacher of life, as the Romans wrote, suggesting that the study of history offers insight into the future. If our species were composed of students who truly applied themselves, from history we would have learned how to avoid continuously massacring each other, for example. Aside from the historian's remark, we would like to discuss with you a hypothetical scenario that might become reality in a few weeks. Let's assume that Adrian Newey has finally decided to give in to Maranello's over-decade-long courtship. This, by the way, seemed quite concrete if we put together the pieces of the puzzle from recent times, not least the decision of Enrico Cardile to leave the red team in order to join the green Aston Martin from next year. Okay, here we are. Adrian Newey dons the mandatory red polo shirt and with his notebook begins to work for Ferrari in Formula One. Yes, but where? In Maranello among Tortellini and Lambrusco. That could also be, since our man, despite many who know him relatively or boast of knowing him, does not disdain the beautiful country, quite the contrary. We don't know him, but what we say is well-founded. The real problem for the former Red Bull engineer arises if he has to move bag and baggage to Italy. But even here, it's a relative problem, in the sense that in reality, even at Red Bull, he is not continuously present. Of course, initially, he will need to get to know the people he will work with, establish a connection, have his own operational hierarchy, and so on. But then, the machine, at least partly, will run on its own. And if instead, our man didn't want to set foot in Italy at all, let's consider it as an extreme hypothesis. What could happen? A similar event has already happened with Ferrari at the end of the 80s of the last century. Those passionate about F1 history already know where we are heading, John Barnard and the story of the technological outpost in Ferrari. Let's frame the specific events. The Ferrari of the last years in which the founder is alive is a Ferrari in deep technical crisis. Enzo understands that the fundamental problem is the chassis/aerodynamics combination and decides to do something unconventional. Go and get the best on the market, John Barnard. This shows that even a very old person can amaze with their mental freshness. John Barnard at McLaren is a meticulous and methodical designer with many insights that later became standard, like the use of composites and the tapering of the side pods to Coca-Cola. His single-seaters win a lot and consistently. Enzo Ferrari signed him in 1987, but the first real creation of the English designer, thanks to the regulatory change in 1989 with the return of naturally aspirated engines for Ferrari the 12-cylinder, is the famous Duck, a technological jewel that has many mechanical innovations as well. For example, the first gearbox with paddles on the steering wheel, which today can be found in almost all racing cars/single-seaters. The Duck, or 640 from the project number, is a single-seater that in 1990, evolved by engineer Scalabroni, almost won the world championship. The dreams of glory for Alain Prost and Ferrari were shattered at the Suzuka circuit in Japan due to the crash caused by Ayrton Senna 2 corners from the start. Meanwhile, John Barnard had already left. He would return in 1993 and stay until 1995. The single-seater with which Michael Schumacher spent his first year at Maranello in 1996 was his, but it was not very successful, to use an understatement. The thing that distinguishes John Barnard's years in red is that he just couldn't adapt to Italy and decided to isolate himself in England with a costly technological outpost, a sort of Ferrari outpost on English soil. To be precise, in the southeast in Guildford, a small building, where the mind, meaning him and his collaborators, designed the single-seater and the arm, meaning Maranello, where it was physically built and assembled to then race. This structure was then sold back to Barnard himself at a discounted price at the end of his second stint at Ferrari, under the presidency of Luca Cordero di Montezemolo. When the divorce between Adrian Newey and Red Bull was announced on May 1st, a series of speculations about the British engineer's destination began, with a substantial list of teams and Ferrari consistently at the top. Some went even further, claiming during the Miami Grand Prix weekend that an agreement between Adrian Newey and Ferrari had already been signed just before leaving for the United States. This is not the case. There were negotiations between Frederick Vasseur and the legendary car designer, which likely went beyond the classic preliminary conversation to a detailed proposal. However, the negotiation with Ferrari was just one of many that Adrian Newey, assisted by Eddie Jordan, conducted, aiming to put all available options on the table. In parallel, the British car designer spoke with at least 3 other teams, including Aston Martin, with the first offer from Lawrence Stroll dating back to last March, McLaren, and Williams. All of this was conducted with strict confidentiality, also due to Adrian Newey's commitment to Red Bull not to disclose any information about his future before September. Among insiders, the rumors continued, leading to the latest scenario where the final choice seems narrowed down to just 2 teams. Some saw Martin Whitmarsh's departure, the CEO of Aston Martin, as a signal, as Adrian Newey did not particularly appreciate Whitmarsh due to the turbulent exit from McLaren in 2005. There is a well-known story in the paddock that Whitmarsh ordered McLaren security personnel to escort Adrian Newey from his office at the new Woking headquarters and through the technical department with all employees at work. Unfortunately, the latest rumors about Scuderia Ferrari have gradually faded, and the latest reports from the Italian media indicated Ferrari executives' firm stance, not willing to engage in a bidding war over the salary. Enrico Cardile's departure left the most important role in the technical department vacant, but it is not a space that a figure like Newey would occupy. Priorities might have changed at Maranello. The immediate need is to have someone at the head of the project, a priority figure compared to a, very special of course, consultant, who has made it clear for some time that he does not want to be involved in a daily presence program. The quietest negotiation so far has been the one held with McLaren. While Aston Martin's case made a lot of noise as a result of Adrian Newey's recent visit to the new Silverstone headquarters, which even required all of the Aston Martin employees to leave for about 2 hours, there are no clear signals indicating the depth of discussions with McLaren Chief Executive Officer Zak Brown and team principal Andrea Stella. Some believe the negotiations have stalled, while others think that his former team might be the surprise ending to a saga that started 3 months ago and is set to continue for another 2. But it could not have been otherwise, given that the focus is on the most successful engineer in Formula One history, a person who has been able to shift technical balances for over 3 decades. Adrian Newey was back in Red Bull team wear at the Silverstone circuit last weekend, despite the gradual reduction in his technical involvement ahead of his eventual departure. We will have to wait for a few more weeks, most likely until September, when his commitment to Red Bull officially expires, in order to learn his final decision and whether the legendary British engineer will finally cross paths with the historic Ferrari F1 team, which, starting with the 2025 Formula One Championship, will boost a strong lineup with Charles Leclerc and 7-time Formula One world champion Lewis Hamilton.